Hello, this is video 4 in the series 1 of tips for coaching. As I mentioned in video 1, my objective is to communicate, do it for nothing, in order to provide some ideas, some thoughts of my own about coaching for you. And these videos, as you know, are completely free. Part of that philosophy, by the way, is, the coach ought to be someone who is humble, is not full of ego. And that's one of the reasons for not editing. Not because I don't care about the quality of the videos, it's also why they're not scripted, because I think it's probably better in the context of coaching for people to know who you are and to get a sense of who you are with the foibles and the mistakes and the errors, etc. With a bit of that, you'll see me as an ordinary human being who's just offering you some thoughts without any particular wish to be egotistical or superior in any way. What I'd like to do with this short video is to go over what I call the 3 principal instruments of coaching. And those were given first in this book, the Performance Coaching book. In 2000, I think 2003, this one, originally. This is in, I think, 5th printing now, with some revisions. The principal instruments don't include exquisite listening. So listening, which underpins just about everything we do in coaching, that's one for a later video, I think probably 6 in the series. But the 3 principal instruments are questioning, pretty good, we need that. Challenge, what's that about? And silence, and what's that about? So I'd like to explain that because semantics, the meanings of words are different for everyone, and I hope if I talk around those just a little bit more, you'll get an understanding, right or wrong, of what those things are in my world, and you can tell and decide and whether that's right for you or not. Coaching, I think we probably accept, requires questioning. Questioning is at the heart of that facilitation style we talked about in the first video of this series, and we need to be able to question and do that well. And there's a whole bunch of different forms of question. There are questions which are probing and inviting people to understand more about what's happening in their heads. We've got questions which might be about trying to get people who are have got lots of options to concentrate and focus down on one particular journey. And we've got questions which would be about looking at the strengths and weaknesses of those journeys in order to hone them in even more, and the approaches and steps on those particular journeys. So questions for lots of different reasons. But questions are all at the heart of the coaching process. And remember who questions are for, we covered that too. Questions should be, in the artful and experienced coached, purely for that coachee, not for you the coach, not so that you can work out what's next or what's going to be the secret thing that's going to turn that individual and help them move forward. That shouldn't be necessary. If we're asking questions specifically concentrating on them and their weaknesses, if I can call it that, in perhaps their beliefs, their understandings, their experience, perhaps the extent that they've self-reflected on particular issues. If we can get them to concentrate on some of these things, with a bit of luck, they will find their own way towards that specific goal, that target that they're looking for. Now, I separate challenge, not because it's necessarily different to questioning. It's just that questions can have different effects. A friend can coach you, and they'll ask you perhaps some questions to help you, but they may not actually challenge you very hard. And a challenging question or a challenging statement, rarely, but it does happen in coaching, a challenging intervention of that sort is going to have an effect. In other words, it's going to, assuming you have that rapport, assuming you have that trust, it's going to get that individual to go internal and start to reflect, to start to have mental, emotional processing that will get them to a different place. And it's the challenge which is the heart of real significant change that coaching offers, as opposed to perhaps a friend or a colleague having a chat with you and asking you some questions. Now, when people are buying coaching, what they really should be buying is challenge. Not obviously from the first second that you sit down. You need to have that trust developed. But pretty early on, the trust should have developed, and you should be ready to challenge at a higher level. And of course, we may need to calibrate that. Say a little bit more about that in a minute. Now, the silent bit in this context and this context alone, because there are different types of silences, which we'll talk about later in the series, I think series 2 actually, is the silence that is created when that coachee, through the challenge, has gone self-reflective. Now, we're going to talk a bit later in another video about how to spot that and some of the elements of self-reflection. But one can see, first off, that the individual is no longer talking. They may seem to have got a little bit absent from the conversation. And if you, the coach, are not comfortable with a silence, then you're not going to be able to hold that silence. You're going to be asking another question. You're going to be challenging them again. And that isn't going to help. It's the self-reflection, that silence in which the coachee is thinking, is having an internal conversation, is seeing and experiencing new interpretations of things, that catharsis, huge change can take place. It can only take place if you sit with that comfortably and allow them to go through that process. Now, it might be a surprise to you, but in the masterclasses I run internationally, sometimes with audiences of 40, 50, 60, 70 people or more, with the lights and with the cameras and all the sound systems, that the coachees invariably are not aware of the technology, or indeed aware of the audience, throughout nearly all the coaching session. And that's very, very common. We know that because the audience ask questions of the coachee afterwards in the what I call a debrief, and we get to learn about that. And the other thing that the audience notices are these long, sometimes long silences which come from those challenges, those challenging questions and statements. And what may be surprising is some of those silences may be 30 seconds, a minute, and longer. And that's a long time. Now, I'm not suggesting, particularly if you're a novice or intermediate level coach, that you're going to get those long silences and that those are going to be constructive silences, but I just want to open up the possibility for you, if you don't already have that in your mind, that silences can be productive. And of course we need to know when those are productive, how those are productive, how we test that without getting in the way of the process. So those are the three things: principal instruments, questioning, challenge, and silence. And in this context, that silence which is self-reflective and gets that individual to a different level of thinking, a different level of understanding, a different level of commitment, a different level of motivation, perhaps even a different level of understanding about who they are and what they're here for. It's those types of challenge with that type of self-reflection which really moves people along. And that, of course, is valuable. And as coaches, we should be providing that service, because that's something they can't do for themselves. That's video 4. Join me again, if you will, for the short video 5, and I look forward to that. Thank you for listening.